everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today is Sunday, October 26th. And really all the announcements is I'm going to introduce our featured speaker today. So today we welcome Sandra Boozer, who is, among other things, a Healing Touch Certified Practitioner, a Certified Integrative Health Coach, and a Spiritual Director. She's also a wife, a mom, a yogi, and a member of Covenant Presbyterian. We're still glad you're here, even though. She has devoted her career to helping people nurture and heal their inner and outer selves through integrating their physical, spiritual, and emotional lives. This ability to integrate parts of ourselves that we frequently treat as separate makes her the perfect leader to guide us through today's class, offering our whole selves to God. So with that, Sandra, take it away. Thank you. Okay. I'll figure something.
Well, it's so good to be with you all this morning, and we were talking earlier. It's been since the beginning of the pandemic since I've been here, so a lot has changed. It's so good to be back, and thank you in advance for your participation. As they say, it's not too late to flee if you're a person that doesn't want to participate, but it's always an invitation to do that. So I'll talk a little bit. We'll have a little time to have a few questions or comments. I'll talk a little bit more, and then we'll have a practice together, and then a time at the end to share and ask questions, comments, whatever's on your mind. So this powerful yet short statement that we're going to be delving into today, offering our whole selves to God. And I'm also immensely grateful for all the teachers and the wisdom that I'll be drawing upon today to share with you all.
Yeah.
Maybe my ear is not big enough. Hopefully this is there. So this is a picture of me, a little red circle. This is me at age 8, my first communion in Austin, Texas with my class. Happy day as I'm smiling. And this is my first memory of offering myself to God. And even though I'm smiling, it was kind of an intense time, when you're an 8-year-old and you're learning about receiving the body and blood of Christ. So I remember it being pretty serious too, actually. And then just a few years later from this, obviously Catholic, I was confirmed and my offering ramped up and I got even more serious. I went and stayed, excuse me, a weekend with cloistered nuns in silence the whole weekend and just doing chores and eating and worshiping together. And I became pretty obsessed with St. Francis and made a little St. Francis decoupage. You remember those little decoupage that we used to make, him feeding the animals? I took Francis as my confirmation name and became a little contemplative. I would go off for an hour or two by myself. So I'd like to think that all of that was an offering to God at an early age. But honestly, looking back on it, it might have been just a refuge, a place to escape my under-resourced large family with 5 siblings and a couple of dogs and parents and chaos going on in the house. So whatever the reason, I'd like to think that God graciously accepted and welcomed my offering as it was. So fast forward years later, as a Presbyterian and a spiritual director in training, I came across this prayer, and it was attributed to St. Francis. A brother overheard him pray, "Who are you, my God, and who am I?" Well, I thought if St. Francis is asking these questions, that maybe it's an invitation for me to do the same. And so although I don't have maybe all the answers, or maybe even many, I still live into these questions, and I have found them to be quite helpful in my journey and my faith, and knowing myself and knowing God just a little bit. So through my own journey, I'm continually reminded that I am first a spiritual being having a human experience. As a human in human skin, living in this world can be joy-filled and it can be challenging, it can be difficult. We experience and witness wounding and trauma and brokenness. And my first profound sense of who I was as an adult whole self began with feeling that absence of wholeness. About 33 years ago, following a long 4-year journey of infertility, loss, grief, and despair, which brought me literally to my knees, tearfully telling God that I was done, that I surrendered. Perhaps an offering in itself, the surrendering. So after that surrendering, it was really the beginning of a new way of being with God, remembering God's loving presence that wasn't just out there somewhere, that was really truly with me in all of the difficulty and all of the pain. And I had really, for that, been on the human doing track. I was doing all the things, but feeling that disconnection still in that. And I had forgotten that I was a whole self, just in my being, without all the doing. In fact, exactly 9 months after my surrendering descent, I held our daughter for the first time and saw the miraculous reflection of wholeness in her. And isn't that just the case? When we look at a baby, we see a whole self, right? And it was just such a beautiful reflection. And I still get emotional. So once again, I remembered that I was a spiritual being, a whole self, a container for holiness. As Anne Lamont said, I had been dragging around in a container of holiness. And I had been doing everything I could as a human to fix what I thought was broken or what was missing. So we are grounded today and hopefully every day in the scripture, Mark 12:30. We are reminded that it takes loving the Lord with all our God with all of ourselves, heart, soul, mind, strength. This is what the Lord asks of us, loving with our whole self, and of course, loving our neighbors as ourselves as well. And we, in fact, are mobile temples for our souls and the divine indwelling of God's Spirit. Our souls, our true selves, our essence, our very nature is inherently whole. And God's presence through Spirit can and does help us remember and re-remember over and over again sometimes what we really already know on a deeper level. So this deeper soul level, if you will, God has created us as resource beings with our intelligence centers, heart, mind, body. As we explore being human in our temple, our spiritual container, let's consider that each one of us lead with one intelligence center, heart, mind, or body. We either feel, think, or act first. And then the other two are integrated, which inform how we embody spirit and soul. So I'll invite you to take a moment and with curiosity, see if you have a sense of which intelligence center is dominant. Do you think, feel, or act first?
Do you want us to answer?
Well, you know what? If you're comfortable sharing, who thinks that they maybe think with their minds first? Yeah. And how about feel with their hearts first? And how about act first? Ah, yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Sandra, could it be like you do different ones at different times? I mean, if something hits you, you may act first, or you may, you may think about it first, but as different things kind of around the universe kind of this year.
Absolutely. And as we work towards balancing all three intelligence centers, that exactly happens. And would be welcome, right? As we respond in the present moment to tapping into our resources. Yeah, great question. So let's take a deeper look into our heart. Our heart has a capacity to feel, to experience and embody love, passion, and empathy, to be relational in both the giving and receiving of all those expressions, and a host of emotions, a lot of emotions sometimes, right? Joy, pain, shame, excitement, anticipation, hope, suffering, apprehension, and a host of others, and contentment, and the fullness, really feeling the fullness of God's love, a heartfelt knowing and longing for God, who knows and longs for us. So how might we explore and grow in our awareness and receptivity of our heart's capacity while processing and balancing our emotional well-being with our mind, body, and spirit? Our mind is also miraculous, and I think several of you all held your hand up. Thinking, gathering knowledge, wisdom, storing memories, understanding complex ideas, processing information, including the knowledge of God. It can also be a source of distractions, of worry, of perhaps thinking too much about future or past. In fact, it's said that we have 60,000 thoughts a day. Wow, I mean, isn't that incredible? So might be a little challenging to be present in the moment with all of that happening in our heads. So how might we mind our minds so we use this resource to help us live focused and mindful lives? How may we be present to the presence of God and what the divine might be doing in that moment right now, and even right now, right? So the body intelligence center contributes by its doing, acting, moving, instinctual responses, experiencing life through all the senses, including full body awe and wonder. The body has its own incredible wisdom. How do we slow down, listen, and trust this wisdom? How might we pay attention and then discern what our bodies are maybe telling us? So all three intelligence centers can help us know and understand our whole selves and others in a deeper, more compassionate way. So doing this inner work is not about navel gazing. When we explore the fullness of who we really are, our true selves, we can allow our habits, patterns, ego, personality, false selves to fall away. When we intentionally work towards aligning and balancing our hearts, minds, bodies with the stirrings of the Spirit, we cultivate an awareness of God and what God might be up to and how we may faithfully offer ourselves in response. So I said a lot there. What are you thinking? Questions? Comments? Or what are you feeling?
60,000 thoughts. So I'm not sure I've had that many in my life.
Yeah, when we are swimming in that world of the swirling thoughts, we're not even attentive, we're not even aware of all that's happening all the time.
How do we go from like, you've got 60,000 thoughts? Sometimes, I don't know about anybody else, but I tend to kind of ruminate on the thought that I'm most worried about, right? And it overwhelms the other 59,000 blah, blah, blah thoughts. And we tend to think about that over thoughts on that to kind of get out of that pattern. And it seems to be thoughts that we're, a bit worried about, or the more negative thoughts that we have sometimes, as opposed to the thoughts of God and the generosity and graciousness and love of God. We tend to kind of go to some of those other areas that we're, truly worried about. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, how do we mind our minds and not let the mind take control instead of us being in charge of focusing the mind? So I often encourage people to select something else very specific to focus their mind on and use that to return to over and over and over again. It's sort of like that muscle memory of training the brain to do what you tell it to do instead of the mind. The mind's just trying to do its job, right? It's trying to solve these things, solve the problems or figure things out. And so I always encourage people to gently and compassionately come back to refocusing the mind on something that is more helpful. So we call that productive thinking instead of just thinking.
Yeah, you want to give us an example of that or something?
So guiding, when I'm working with people and I help guide them, but it doesn't have to be me, of course, it can be meditations, it can be maybe using a word in prayer over and over again to come back to peace, be still, calm.
Good.
Yeah, just again, always gently coming back, not beating self up, because that can be a loop too, right? I shouldn't be thinking these thoughts, I should be able to do X, Y, Z without being distracted. But the reality is that with all of that happening, all the things happening around us, it's quite easy to be distracted and to be pulled away from understanding what's happening within ourselves. So when we become distracted, of course, it can happen quite quickly that we feel separated. Our heads feel separate from our heart, or our heads feel separate from our bodies. And I was talking to Gerald about this, and this was one of the reasons why I felt it important to talk about this, because, excuse me, often when we're going through really difficult times in our lives, I work with cancer patients, then of course we are going to be distracted in a way of our focus being on treatment, on becoming, well again. And again, it can be challenging to stay centered and grounded in our whole selves and all the resources that are there for us and our spiritual resources, to use those resources in the healing process.
I have no short-term memory. I think it's in one of the Psalms, but it says something like, be still and know that I am God. And I think my girlfriend is a meditation. We'll go through and she'll do the whole sentence and then she'll focus on each word.
Yes, it's a beautiful meditation. So the good news is now that there is so many practices and so many resources, out for us to draw upon, whether it's, again, prayerful meditation, just guided meditations, music meditations. There are just so many ways to help us recenter and reground. Thank you.
I would just say, if you picked body, action, I think you have to have heart and mind in place already. Otherwise, you're going to act without thinking or feeling, and that's not a good way to act. So I think it's heart and mind feed into body. Otherwise, you just be all up doing things you should not be doing.
Yeah, definitely the heart and mind inform that action that we take. But sometimes we don't always think through, right? Some of us feel and then act, and we leave out the thinking through everything. So full disclosure, I lead with my heart. I think y'all probably gathered that as I got choked up in my first sharing. But sometimes I leave out all the thinking, everything through, and I feel it and I do it. And so, yeah, it can be somewhat problematic. So it's an area that I've been working on. Yeah,
But so sometimes, in my experience, like your thought, your action, your heart, your feeling are all in conflict with each other. So how do you work through that? And even if you do a word where you focus, peace or be still or whatever, at some point, that problem, whatever it might be, still exists. And you return to that. So do you have any suggestions of, like you're talking about wholeness, so how do you bring those pieces together?
yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so this awareness around what is happening is the first step. And when we have awareness, then we can be attentive to what is happening. And really looking into the patterns of what's happening and then disrupt those patterns. So in my case, knowing that I have that pattern of feeling and then doing and sometimes leaving out the thinking. And sometimes it happens, right? Because it might be in conflict to the other part of me. And I don't really want to, do that, deal with that. And so it's again, an invitation to bring awareness, attentiveness to paying attention of what's going on and look at the patterns and then disrupt those patterns and begin to give whatever's being left out a chance to come into alignment. And then through our discernment process and our faith and bringing all of that to God in prayer and, various spiritual practices, we can then be supported in that growth. Because we're talking about growth, right? Now transformation.
Because I found that surrender is surrender is really helpful. That every time I get to a point where I just say, I cannot handle this, take it. Something comes to me. It may not be immediate, but it's not long. That it brings back to that peace, even in the midst of the chaos.
Yeah, beautiful surrender. Yeah.
I find if I do something right when I wake up, sort of before my ego can get in the middle of it, that I might be a little more successful. In Circle, we're doing Galatians. And Jack Williamson said, I want you to answer these questions. So I would take one question and I do it like before I could really sort of wake up and journal about these questions. And it was kind of surprising the answers, like, but it's sort of like sort of getting myself out of the way, right?
Yeah, getting yourself out of the way. The ego personality. And the ego personality is part of those patterns. So I'm hearing I'm going to be attentive in this way to this practice and what I'm working on before the pattern starts to go for the day. And I fall asleep to myself and I fall asleep to what God's doing. Yeah, it's beautiful. So as we're describing, this inner work can be challenging. Can illuminate weaknesses, fears, flaws, imperfections. So it takes vulnerability and humility and strength to face and to disrupt these patterns that might be getting in the way of our whole selves, our wholeness, and our relationship with God. And sometimes, again, that separation that we might be experiencing within ourselves, or that tension between what is happening within us and maybe, again, a perceived perception of separation with God. So when we embrace the reality of our shadow, seeing our whole selves truthfully, we are called to remember the deeper truth that we have been created in the image of God, full of goodness, light, and love and grace, which is part of the all-encompassing whole. As C.S. Lewis states, the almost impossible thing is to hand over our whole selves, wishes, and precautions to Christ. So what else feels impossible to hand over ourselves, our whole selves?
I think it's kind of easy to hand over the good stuff. But the stuff I'm worried about, I'm like, okay, God, you've got floods, you've got famines, I've got this, when I really don't. But there's part of me that wants to hold on to the fear and the worry and concern.
A part of you wants to hold on to that. Yeah. Because
I whatever the problem or fear or situation is, I want a certain outcome. I want a certain guarantee that God is going to do what I want. I want to tell God what to do. I want to say, okay, God, these are the problems and this is what I need you to do that. And he says, baby girl, I created you. Well, are you going to tell me? I'm not required to tell you that. And also, it always takes longer than I want it to, and also God loves everybody, which I don't. But he's trying to bless another person's with whatever's problem or the situation is. That drives me nuts. It's driving.
yeah, so we can, again, bring our awareness there, see it, shine some light on that, and say, okay, this is just part of this pattern that I'm aware of. Now, how can I be attentive and begin to disrupt that? And how can God help me do that? Which is, again, challenging, right? God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by a process of subtraction. It has taken me years, a lifetime, to see that God has used everything in my life. As Richard Rohr says, everything belongs, which has included subtraction, the stripping away, the emptying. That is when I've returned to my core, my essence, and knowing that God has been and is present in even the most painful of times. One of those was pivotal 17 years ago when my beloved brother, Rob, died unexpectedly. Through a year of unraveling and subtraction, I journeyed into a deeper awareness of God's loving presence in a way I had not known possible. In all my confusion, anger, despair, and grief, which felt like a dying into myself, I also had moments, sometimes very fleeting, but I had them, of a deep sense of comfort and grace, hope, and unconditional love. It was a re-remembering once again of my whole self being connected and loved by God through the process of subtraction. A letting go of so much I thought had been important before, and everything shifted for me. And led me into the work that I do now, and that I could never have imagined ever doing the work that I do now 20 years ago, and where I found great joy and growth and purpose and really transformation. And I'm so grateful for it. From this liminal place, I had the space to bring my awareness to God's presence. I offered myself, my whole self, just as it was, perhaps having a wider glimpse of how I might be attentive and participate with God in the present, resting in God's fullness. God's very nature is fullness, an infinite presence of God. The nature of God is a circle of which the center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere. Such beautiful wisdom from the 5th century Greek philosopher. I'm always amazed at how small and limiting I imagine God to be. I just, over and over again, I'm just shocked at how small I make God. So we are not meant to live into this wholeness alone. So how do we recognize, welcome, love, and support one another into this oneness, this fullness? How are we receptive to accepting what is being offered to us in this ever widening circle without a circumference, interconnected in unity as beloved community? So if this union is always happening in and through God and with each other, and God is always present, aren't we always offering our whole selves? And just sometimes aren't aware or perhaps intentional about that reality. Wholeness is all that it has come before us, connected with nature, animals, people, through time and space, beyond ourselves. An immense greater knowing. How do we bring awareness to this greater knowing, this incarnational way of loving as Jesus taught us to live into within our community, within our world? So how do we trust that this is true? This way of embodying love and spirit as whole spiritual beings and the greater oneness of God. How do we use all of our resources, heart, mind, body, strength, soul, and spirit to embody this love? All of these resources can help us discern how to best integrate our inner and outer resources, our gifts, talents, collective offerings, and participation in this greater whole. So I've highlighted several of the ways that may guide us into this greater whole, this greater knowing, and offering ourselves to God and with God. There are many ways we can practice, experience, and embody these. This morning, I'd like to offer the practice of an inquiry of wholeness. So the invitation this morning will be to practice through inquiry. And since this may be a practice that's new for many of you all, I'll guide you through, and in a moment, Suzanne and I will demonstrate, and after I describe. So we will pair up, and we'll just move the chairs so you can get nice and comfortable in pairs. And one person will begin by asking one or both, whatever you want to do, this repeating question. How do you experience wholeness? And what is your experience of wholeness? They'll continue to ask the question, the same person, for 3.5 minutes. Your partner will answer the question differently or the same, or perhaps even passing if nothing comes to you. I'll be timing. And then we'll have a little time in between to reground, and then you'll switch. And the other person will ask again, one or both of these questions, however you wish, over and over again. And that person will be listening, be present. And the person that is listening and asking the question will not react, will not respond, will not say anything. They'll just say other than thank you, and they'll ask again. So a little different, yeah. So Suzanne and I are going to demonstrate.
Uh-oh.
Thank you. And I'll keep the questions up, so don't worry about that. We'll just take a breath. Suzanne, what is your experience of wholeness?
I think I use my eyes to see experiences and people and things around me, that I'm always aware of what is around me, and then try to process that. That's a good, bad, or different answer, but it's kind of how I experience it. I like to be visual and tactile and take it all in.
How do you experience wholeness?
Pretty much the same as what I just said. I make this fun for everybody, it is the thoughtful. And I can also pass if I thought and need more time to think about whether I expand on the answer or not. So this time, this is for demonstration, so I'll pass this time.
Thank you. Suzanne, what is your experience of wholeness?
I think being in a room, the people that I have a lot of experiences with, and feeling how they feel about this situation and what we're talking about. In some ways, for me, that's how I experience wholeness.
So get the rhythm. So after 3.5 minutes, we'll swap, and then Suzanne would have asked me those same questions. And then we'll have a time for you all to, as pairs, to talk a little bit about that, what that was like for you, and then if you would like, and share the group. Coming back to the group. I'd love to hear what that was like for you, what you noticed. Asking, responding.
Still talking.
Being present in that way. What did you notice? Or if you have a question or a thought about our time together.
We both felt it made us a little uncomfortable.
So we're squirming. You were squirming. Yeah, we're uncomfortable. Would you like to say more about the discomfort? What was
So we
it?
didn't grow up, searching our souls or whatever this is, as younger people. And as psychologists have learned to do, it was just not comfortable doing it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's something really different than, that you're not used to. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
It's a tough question. It's a tough question. I don't think we tend to think about what pride means, maybe it's what she said. So there is that uncomfortableness, but then I think as you unpack it a little bit, you get a little more comfortable. Maybe that's your point. Say it's.
Yeah, the repetitive questions were interesting for us because I think our first feeling is, well, we already answered that question. Did you hear me? And so, you know, the idea of asking again to try to get a little decent was interesting and not something we do regularly.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So you go beyond that initial, what has bubbled up, and you go perhaps a little deeper, yeah. And again, the purpose, a little bit more time, a little bit more space to go deeper. The staying present in it, even in the discomfort, that, you know, this is really something different to do. And this idea that it's not about navel gazing. It's not about, I'm gonna focus on myself. It's about connecting that into that deeper place where God resides, where God's spirit has been planted, divine spirit within us. And it's an opportunity to see what's there, see what we might be, again, present to receiving, to listening, on that deeper place of us. Yeah,
You ever do that with younger people?
yeah.
What kind of answers you get then?
Yeah, I have not done the inquiry practice with younger people, but my experience with like the youngest people that I've worked with are 16, 17 years old. And they describe more of the anxiety, the looping thinking, the inner critic. And so oftentimes it's working with them to help and quiet the mind, to be present within themselves. So I've not done this particular practice with them, but I think that would be really interesting to do.
Well, what's interesting is that this is sort of an open-ended question, right? It's not directions, right? I'm trying to get to, I keep calling it Presbyterian. I'm trying to get where's no line? How do I get directions? Well, you take a left, you go down. So, you have a sort of open-ended question, and because you say it from the time, you're like, oh, okay, well, there's kind of this part and that part, and so it makes your brain is thinking in a way that it doesn't normally think. Yeah.
Yeah, so using the resource of the brain in a different way. Yeah. Did anybody have a emotional response, something from the heart?
I think it's more of a vulnerability. It wasn't in my head. It was like this sense of being vulnerable, to truth. And with people you don't really know that well, you know?
Yeah, which can take a great amount of strength to be vulnerable like that.
And I mean, but I remember, you know, what the name, what is the name? Brene Brown, who says vulnerability is our greatest strength. And that just kind of came, you know, to me, so.
Yeah, and maybe the body, maybe the squirminess of discomfort, maybe we feel that in our bodies. So, thank you so much for your presence, your participation. It adds to the richness of this conversation.